I'm glad you brought Penn State in, because I think all these teams are relevant when you talk. If you talk to a Penn State person, you're talking to a Michigan person now, or another Ohio State person. Those three teams are symbiotically related now. And if you look at the last 3 years in the Big Ten East, you can see in 2016, all three had their turn. Michigan got up to number 2 in the country. Ohio State got up to number 2 in the country. Penn State ended up winning the league. Ohio State got to the Big Ten championship. So Michigan beat Penn State. Penn State beat Ohio State. Michigan beat Ohio State. They all beat each other. In 2017, Ohio State was the champion and Penn State was right there. This year, Ohio State was the champion and Michigan was right there. And Penn State kind of took the slight step back that Michigan took in 2017, but was still very relevant with a 9-win year. And Michigan went 8-5 the year before. The point I'm making by bringing in that recent history is Urban Meyer at Ohio State was 22-3 in games decided by 7 points or less. That's insane. Insane. That's an 88% clip. I promise you Ryan Day won't do that, because no one does that. There's a reason he's got the greatest win percentage since Frank Leahy and Knute Rockne. No one's going to do that. Now, let's say Ryan Day is the next Lincoln Riley. And let's say he has a crazy 75% success rate in games decided by 7 points or less. That is still astronomical. Okay? But with where those three teams are at right now, that's essentially an extra loss a year. And that's how small the margin for error in this conference was. If you watch Penn State this year, you had the best quarterback the school's ever had. Their wide receiver unit, Trace McSorley's made a career throwing the ball up for one-on-one jump balls and guys coming down. Well, there were no Chris Godwins coming down with those balls this year. And you saw Miles Sanders is really good. He's not Saquon Barkley, but there really wasn't much of a drop-off in production at that position. The issue was they didn't have the downfield passing game that they had before. And so that one position group taking a step back is the difference between Penn State playing for an East Division title in the last weekend and being a 4-loss team. And so I think whether it's Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State, and they're all now kind of consensus top, 8, 15 recruiting classes every single year. And it doesn't take much slippage at one position group. For Michigan, it was quarterback and offensive line. But the defense was just as good in 2017, and they went 8-5. Penn State, it was the wide receivers and Trace McSorley playing at about 75, 80%. If Ryan Day is just a really, really good coach and wins 75% of those games decided by a touchdown or less, we're talking about Ohio State now being a 9-3, 10-2 team instead of a 10-2, 11-1 team. And so for all of those three teams, it doesn't take much of a tweak or much of a setback to determine that you're first or third in this division going forward, I think.
I think it's a great point. Urban Meyer has his detractors for generally off-the-field reasons. We won't talk about that. We'll talk football. But while Nick Saban claims, not himself personally, but the college football nation basically claims that he's the greatest coach of all time, and I certainly get that the championship means more than anything, I put it into context within the structure of college football rather than it being professional sports where there's an objective system that determines who makes the playoffs and then you go on to compete for a championship versus what is the selection that particular year and the opportunity given. So not discounting Nick Saban's championships because Alabama has closed the deal more often than not. But in terms of winning consistently year after year after year, I posted Urban Meyer's worst records in his years at all four schools. And his worst season was 8-5 in 17 years. Now, you find a coach in the history of college football, certainly modern college football history since World War II, past the black and white photos of Leahy and Rockne, and you've got Urban Meyer at the top. Yeah. And basically, his worst season at Ohio State was 11-2 in 7 seasons. I would claim he to be the most consistent winner that we've seen.
The numbers speak for themselves. I mean, I'm not probably the person to come on here and lobby for Urban. I think it's the greatest run of all time. But arguing about Urban Meyer, again, speaking strictly for what happens on the field. It's a little bit like, are arguing, Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig. The numbers you can, yes, is the answer. Okay. I mean, we're talking about an all-time great here. And I think this is now the challenge for Michigan is Jim's done a great job. Jimmy's done a phenomenal job rebuilding our program. Let me throw you a couple numbers. In the last 3 drafts, we've had 8 guys picked in the first 3 rounds. In the previous 8 drafts before Harbaugh arrived at Michigan, that's how many guys we had picked in the first 3 rounds. And we might have 5 or 6 guys picked in the first 3 rounds in this coming draft. Michigan's already been ranked in the top 10 of the AP poll as many times under Harbaugh as it was the entire decade before he arrived. So, and I mentioned earlier, they have the 7th best record in college football the last 4 years. But here's the crossroads. If I would, Jim was hired 4 years ago last Sunday. And if the day that he was hired, December 30th, 2014, if I would have said to any Michigan fan, after 4 full seasons, Harbaugh will be 1-9 against the AP top 10, no division titles, no wins against Ohio State, no conference titles. No Michigan fan would have believed that prediction would occur. So that's true too. Now, there's a difference between reasons and excuses. Okay. Reasons are why you haven't been able to do something we know you can do that are legitimate reasons why, right? Like it's not, this year or last year when Aaron Rodgers was hurt most of the year and the Packers sucked, that wasn't an excuse. That was the reason they sucked. This year, he was healthy all year long, or at least he was in the lineup. So that's not a reason, it's an excuse. So a reason is why you didn't do a legit reason why you didn't do something or cause why you didn't do something we know you can do. An excuse is the cause of why you didn't do something you should be able to do. There's a difference there. So for a while, we've had this reason at Michigan that Harbaugh hasn't taken the next step, and the reason was Urban Meyer. Well, he's gone now. I will tell you this right now. Jim Harbaugh cannot lose to a 39-year-old rookie coach at home in that game next November. Just can't. And I'm already on record as saying that. I think that if he is, or predicting what I'm about to say now, I think if he loses to Ohio State next year, and because I can't foresee a scenario, I would say it's less than 10% that Michigan could win the East without beating Ohio State. But the stuff that would have to happen beyond that is crazy. Okay. So if he doesn't beat Ohio State next year, I think he'll go to the NFL.
And you think a 11-1 Michigan team or a 10-2 Michigan team, we won't make it that drastic, that loses to Ohio State still moves Jim Harbaugh either by his own choice or others will move him out of that coaching spot?
I think it'll be his own choice. I think it'll be, he's too embedded financially and relationally with the university, but I'm seeing it now. And, this isn't my first rodeo and you know what I do full time. So I'm pretty good at filtering out, the trolling fringe in social media and what's a legitimate reaction of a fan base. And I'll just give you one anecdotal piece of evidence. Go back and look at the amount of Michigan fans not in the stands of that Peach Bowl and how many of them gave up their tickets. The university announced, you know how bowl games work, Mark? When the university announces that it didn't sell 1/3 of its tickets, what does that tell you? Okay. So that means that's the alumni, your base, your top level donors. That's who's the only people who get tickets directly from the university are the people most connected to the program. Everybody else is going through, tours and brokers and everything else. So when the people closest to the program weren't interested in going to a New Year's Six bowl, when you've got 2 of your captains not playing against their home state school, and then when Devin Bush gets voted MVP of the team by his players, and Harbaugh overrules that and has Chase Winovich win the award instead because he didn't like Devin Bush skipping the bowl game, we're at that. Today's college football, I don't think Harbaugh can continue to be a 10-3 coach. And I look at what happened with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. So he gets them to the next level in 2012. They get to the championship game, right? And then they get routed. Brian Kelly loses 9 games the next 2 years. And then he gets close to the playoffs in 2015 and loses that game to Stanford at the end of the year. And the next year he's 4-8. And he had to completely reinvent his program. New coordinators on both sides of the ball. The point I'm bringing this up is today's college football, the recruits you need to get and to become and stay elite, they move on. Once you can only sell hope a few recruiting cycles. And then it's results. And either they move on to the next hotness who has the hype narrative, or they go back to the old standbys like your Ohio States and Alabamas. And I think Michigan's getting that close to that juncture right now. Okay. So I think you're going to see Michigan become either take the next step this fall, or you're going to see them become sort of a cycle up program, which is what Stanford has now become. You know, Stanford knocked on the door 4 years in a row. And now if you look at the last 4 years, they've lost 3 games or more, 3 of the last 4 years. And in 2 of those years, they lost 5 games, including this last season. You know, so I think that's the crossroads Michigan is at right now. And I think that's what Harbaugh's got to figure out, is how to take that next step.